to go. Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to getting into the music and your career. So thank you for taking a minute out today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So before we get into the new album, I want to know first and foremost, 5 years ago, this pandemic changed so many things about all of our lives, especially, actually, you know what? I need to do something real quick here before we hop in. I just realized
hmm
something. I have a backdrop I need to change real quick. Give me one quick second. Yeah. Sometimes there's too
Take this
much going
off.
on.
Yeah,
Let me just
that's
do this real quick here. There we go. That's what I want. Okay, cool. All right. All right, man. Hey, we'll take two. Hey, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
absolutely good to see you again, Joe.
Good to see you. So let's begin our journey with 5 years ago, this pandemic. So many
hmm
things happened. So many things changed our world, especially for musicians. How did you ultimately get through it? How did it influence this album and the way that you approach things today?
Oh, good question. Well, the way that it directly influenced this album is like this was actually recorded during that time, and it took
Yeah.
me quite a while to get it out. It was more toward the tail end of the pandemic, but I was invited to do this radio production for the radio station in Bremen in this beautiful hall. It's called the Sendesaal. In the German town of Bremen, and yeah, it was one of those concerts that were so special because there were very few concerts from between for an audience, you know. So I think that was the main thing. Like I was just missing playing for an audience, you
Yeah.
know. That was the
Yeah.
main thing, I think.
And I think during that time period, I remember listening to live recordings and it just felt different. There was a different feel
Mm,
to it because no one knew when it was going to come back. No one knew how this, and we already talked during the pandemic in 2022. We had
exactly.
interviewed
Yeah.
during the release of Givers and Takers. So it was a very special time. So how did you what was kind of the nexus of doing this project? How did it all kind of chronologically begin and actually get to a point where we have a CD in our hands?
Right. So I've been working with my record label, Berthold Records. They're based out of Bremen for many years. My first record I did with them was in 2016, and Givers and Takers, the last record that we talked about, was also on with them. And they were approached. I don't know exactly how it worked, but they had this partnership with the radio station in Bremen to stage a series of concerts, and they asked me as one of their longstanding artists whether I'd be into doing it, and I was like, yeah, and I took this opportunity, knowing the hall very well, and I've played there several times before, and I knew that what works really, really well there is an acoustic
Yeah.
band, as opposed to the electroacoustic stuff I had been doing in recent years. And I'd played there with Fly Magic, my band, and it didn't really fly so well. So I was just like, well, let me just put my dream band together. Let me ask the people I really want to play with. And I did this research project in 2020, a while ago, but I finished it in 2020. It was my doctoral thesis about Manfred Eicher, the ECM Records founder and producer. It was about his creative process. And I always felt like, man, I need to make an artistic project out of that. That, like, having learned so much in my scholarly process, and I wrote a dissertation and I'm working on a book now, but I also, like, as a musician, it's like I want to put this into some kind of an artistic project. So those were the thoughts, and I put this band together with Ralph Alessi on trumpet, who at that time, like, I know from New York, but I at that time he was teaching in Switzerland. Thomas Stroenen, he is a drummer, an ECM drummer I know from Oslo, Norway. He was also part of my study, my doctoral study. I asked him if he wanted to be on it. Elias Stemmiseder, New York, Berlin-based pianist, and Chris Tordini, who I also know from New York. So I put this band together that, like tied my own biography, that which is so bicontinental, being from Germany, living in New York for 15 years, and that's why the record is called Bremen New York, because it happened in Germany, where I'm from, in Bremen, with my connection to the label, and that radio production, that radio hall, but then also with my whole biography of being a New York-based musician for the past 15 years, and the lineup reflects that. So I just asked these folks, and people at that time had time, so it was actually kind of easy to put the band together. And we did it, and we had no rehearsal or like a run through, and had the afternoon in the space that was already recorded, and then the concert. But all the takes were taken from the concert because of the energy with the audience. It was a sold out show, so yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And initially, I didn't even necessarily plan for this to be a record.
Yeah.
It was initially a radio production. It was broadcasted on the radio after recorded and having done like they did a rough mix or like a radio mix, and they broadcasted the whole concert. But it turned out so well that we were like, man, we have to put this out. And it's my first live record, and on upon reflection, I was just like, my favorite recordings are live records. A lot of them are.
Yeah.
And jazz and improvised music feeds off the moment, and it's like this the thing we do all the time,
Yeah.
play live in different kinds of rooms, and then we go into the studio and we do these like very produced, sometimes overproduced recordings. I was just like, all right, this is completely live. The band hadn't rehearsed. It was I kept everything like compositionally as little complex as possible for us to make music right away. So for my own limitation was like I want every composition to fit on a page. And it worked. It worked
Yeah.
so well that we were like, okay, here it is.
You know what's interesting about the live take is I'll hear sometimes musicians say they, the sound engineer has the ability to record, so can we do it? And they're like, yeah. So there's no pressure. You're not
Mm,
thinking it's going to be an album. So it almost seems like with this, even though it was on radio, there's still an element of that that's like you're not like under the pins and needles of this is going to be a record. Do you feel like maybe that's a part of the relaxed nature, the kind of the more integral improv nature
mm.
of it?
That's a good question. Maybe partly. That
Yeah,
that can definitely feed into it. The other thing is also like I think honestly, everyone in the band is so experienced and such a
yeah,
professional that
true.
we really took it as a concert. I think, it's the experience part of it as well. Um, but it's like when you go to the studio, in order to create momentum, I feel like a lot is needed. There's no outside stimulus. Sometimes you're even completely isolated in your booth and you're in front of the mic and it's not mixed yet. So when you listen back to it, it's just like, especially with the saxophone, a lot of times you sound dry and it's just like, oh God, this is horrible.
Yeah.
Whereas like you're in the space, you have the acoustic, the room has an absolutely outstanding acoustic. I think it's where Keith Jarrett recorded the Bremen part of the Bremen Lausanne
Yeah.
album. So it's just like the sound, and then there's the audience. So I think being with the audience kind of makes you forget about the recording because the audience is there. It's more imminent, so you have to do that and
Yeah.
play for and with the audience and have that synergy. I think that it just comes to the forefront. And as you are saying, I think you're actually right. You kind of forget that this is going to be a record
Uh-huh.
in a way. Um, yeah, yeah. I haven't really thought about it the how about that question in particular, but that's a good point. Could have played into it.
Yeah, for sure. I remember after I started the show, Neon Jazz started in 2011. I think it was around 13 or 14, Sonny Rollins came out with the road shows, that collection.
Mm,
And I was really
mm,
digging into the history of that because I interviewed him at the time, and he just always wanted it to be live. He wasn't a studio guy, did not like it, right?
mm,
I mean, he did it, but it was just not the thing. And I think I'm noticing that more and more with a lot of kind of the younger generations that came behind Sonny, that there's this thirst for really presenting it the way it is. For instance, the reason why I bring this up is Kansas City had a jazz and blues festival for a long time, and they just reinvigorated it, and they came back on Saturday. And
nice,
I was out there taking pictures, and Bill Frisell was up there with Rudy Royston and Greg Tardy, and they were just destroying it, like in such a
amazing.
wonderful way. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, dude, if this could be something that people could listen to, even
Yeah.
from that crowd, and they could have that as a recording, how special would that be? So my question
Mm.
to you is there a part of this live experience that you might see as a trend that people are going after more, especially in light of going through that pandemic and not having live music?
It's so interesting that you say that because my experience or my thinking around this is kind of the opposite. I always thought like no one is doing this.
Right.
Maybe I missed those records that
Right.
you're talking about, but I feel like everyone is so studio obsessed. And I, including me, I've done this too. And the studio is an amazing tool for music making. I feel like going in, like when you book a studio date, there's this big temptation of really digging into the possibilities that the studio has to offer. And on the one hand, that's great. And I think that on the other hand, at least in terms of my experience, it's almost a little unorthodox to put out a live record. You have longer takes because you make the takes as long as the situation in the moment needs it. So who's listening to 12-minute takes on Spotify?
Yeah.
Like you don't even get into a playlist. Um, you make mistakes, so the mistakes are on the record,
Yeah.
and you have a live sound. So all these things combined, I feel like people don't really do this. So I like when I decided when the label and I we decided to put it out, I was just like, F it. It is what it is.
Yep.
It's uncompromisingly live. Takes are 10 minutes plus. That's the way it is. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. But I love it, we love it, so we did it. I feel like there's this obsession or maybe obsession is the wrong word of like I think it's also partly fear that I think a lot of artists are afraid that people don't listen to their thing and then they try to the first track on a record a lot of times it's just like bomb in your face and like try it like is short and you try to place it in a playlist and et cetera and this album was intentionally we just said we're just making the most beautiful record we can and I didn't even think further than that.
The interesting thing about musicians, because I'm not a musician. I mean, I
Mm,
fiddled around on the drums and here and there, but I'm just don't think like a musician. And I just don't think most people in the audience hear mistakes.
mm.
You know what I'm saying? So I hear that a lot. There was some missteps, there was some miscues, the notes didn't work, the bridge fell apart. There's things that just will come across to the musician, but I guess my point is that sometimes I think that when these recordings come out, the peccadillos might actually enhance it, might be the sauce and pickle for what you're doing.
I agree, and I think you're right on the money. I mean, I've had this experience myself where we do something and something doesn't like work out, and we were all like, "Oh no, this didn't work out," and then an
Yeah.
audience member would come up and no one noticed anything.
Uh-uh.
And we play a lot of times we play original music that no one else outside of us knows. How would they even know it's a mistake?
Yeah.
But I'm like, if you look back in the history of live recordings within the jazz tradition, there are some very obvious things, like you would have Miles Davis playing, ahead, and then his note breaks.
Yeah.
Like it literally doesn't come out, and then you hear that it's like a bop or whatever,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
he tries to hit a note, it doesn't get it, and it just like crackles. Those are things where I think it's pretty obvious that this wasn't intended, but they didn't care.
Yeah.
It was just and I for many many years in the history of jazz recordings, um, they one always tried to simulate or like create this live illusion.
Yeah.
So you would have these like prestige records with Miles Davis where they intentionally left like the studio chatter on. So it has that feel,
Hmm.
you know? So I think there's a whole tradition of that in recent years, like, at least to my sense, has been a little bit abandoned.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I think people that really love this music, that like maybe not purist in the right word, but just people like for me being a radio guy and loving jazz, I actually went and saw the back end of the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra doing a rehearsal at one point. I got invited and I watched it. And
Amazing.
that was one of the most memorable things that I've seen. And I've seen phenomenal shows. I mean, like even with Frizzell and those cats Saturday. But when you get behind and you hear the paper and the sheets getting, you know, torn open or, you know,
Mm,
like flipped over, pencils are going over it and people are collaborating, and then all of a sudden there's a cacophony of music, and then it just kind of slowly comes down or it abruptly stops. All of those things I think jazz fans really enjoy. I think it's
Mm,
like the part of liner notes when you see behind, the scenes of Dinah Washington recording some seminal album, or Miles in the studio and all of that. It's like those are things that I think humanizes this process where it's already very human. It just adds
mm.
another layer to it, which is comforting, I think.
I I mean, that's exactly how I feel about it. I love
Yeah.
when you hear the saxophone player breathing in
Uh-huh.
before the note. I know mixers or engineers who want to take that out, or band leaders. I I still think it's humans making music, and I think you should hear the humans make that music, you know? So I'm with you there. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. So if you all are you all going to get back together in this incarnation that was on this recording and play?
Yeah, I'm currently trying to book some dates. Um, it's and coming back to the pandemic, it's a lot harder to get those folks together now than it
Yeah.
used to be
Uh-huh.
because everyone's busy again, and that's good, you
Yeah.
know. So I have a show next this month on the 23rd at the Owl Music Parlor in New York, which is one of my favorite clubs. It's closing at the end of this year, and that was intended for this band, and then two people had to cancel because of European tours,
Yeah.
and Chris Tordini is still in the band, but it's a different thing now. So I'm still going to present the music. It's
Yeah.
going to be a little different, and that's okay. The music is actually very malleable because of the way it was initially written. So it is what it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're looking at some dates in January next year with this band.
Okay. So it's obviously out on stream. If anybody wants to pick up a copy, where can they do that? Or any of your previous recordings, where's the best place to go?
I think the best place would be on Bandcamp.
Okay.
Google my name or the name of the record, Bremen, New York, and you'll find it there.
Okay, excellent.
Mm.
So great to catch back up with you. Thank you for taking a minute out. Always great conversation, man.
Yeah, man, Joe, same to you.
Yes.